people don't come to church because they're healthy. They come to church because they need healing. And like one thing that I've noticed after talking to a bunch of like atheists and agnostics, who are like dear friends, is that they'll bring up the word like hypocrisy. And I think what people don't realize is that most Christians you talk to, I'm not saying this from like a perspective, like I have everything all right and that my worldview is completely biblical because I'm still going through a sanctification period. But most people that you're going to meet who say they're Christian they don't believe basic tenets of the Bible.
I thought maybe we could talk directly to people who are doing some coaching or mentoring or leading other people this time, and one of the things I think might come up in your conversations is somebody might ask you the question of what does it mean to be a Christian? Because there's so much now more than ever. There's so much. I think misunderstandings out in our culture and in our societies about what it is to be a Christian. I think there are people out there who sometimes believe, well, just because I was born into a Christian family, or I was born into a Christian nation, that makes me a Christian. Have you ever heard that?
I don't know. I've heard some like just like interesting like theology that doesn't seem to line up with like the Bible, and like people will call themselves Christians. And like from the statistics that I've seen, it apparently only 4% of people who identify as Christians in America have a biblical worldview, which is just an insanely tiny amount.
Right.
And so you'd imagine like the people that you meet who call themselves Christians, and not that you can like judge someone's heart, but it's just like insane that most people that you meet like who are Christians like don't have a biblical worldview.
That is definitely an important part of what we're talking about. It's there are so much misunderstandings out there about what a Christian is, and I think it, just because you're born into a Christian family or you're born into a Christian nation, or you've gone to church even a few times, that doesn't mean that you understand what a biblical worldview is. And when we say biblical worldview, that's not a word that a lot of people use. I don't see worldview plastered all over a lot of social media. So what does worldview really mean? When we're talking about biblical worldview, what does that mean for you?
Yeah, so everyone has a worldview. So a worldview is just defined on the way that you perceive the world. So like, what do you think about Earth?
Where did it come from?
Yeah, where did it come from? Where are we going? Like, so yeah.
And why am I here?
Yeah. And a biblical worldview, I mean, it's derived from biblical terms. It means that you have a worldview that is grounded in basic tenets of Christianity. And so when my experience coming into this and like looking at the research, at first I go, this is not true. And I was like, somebody's like making up some probably random tenets and just saying that most Christians don't agree with this. It's probably something very like small and arbitrary. Well, then when you actually look into like what is defined as a biblical worldview, this is meaning that you believe Jesus Christ died on the cross for your sins, that Jesus is or that God is like 3 in 1, so the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, that God created the universe and he's an all-powerful creator. So these are like things that are basic that like I know quite a few people would look at it and be like, oh, I feel like most Christians agree with that, but that's not always the case. Like anyone can slap a term on themselves and not know what it means.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot more. There's more things to define, but yeah, those are key.
Yeah, so
principles.
I'm going into very shallowly because we obviously can't like sit down and describe everything because we only have like 15 or 20 minutes.
Right.
But those are just a couple of things.
To me, being a Christian is more about being a Christ follower. In other words, when you look at what happened in the early church, no one was called Christians at the beginning, and when they were called Christians, it was considered a derogatory term. It was a knock on them instead of a positive thing. You didn't want to be named as a Christian, but it meant that you were following Christ. You're following Jesus, and that meant you were doing the things he was saying to do. Love your neighbor. A lot of the things that he did, he Jesus was really radical when he came in at the time. He balked the system in a lot of ways, which is one of the reasons why they tried to kill him,
Mm-hmm.
because he established that women had more value than what the status quo was at the time. He reached out to the people who were outcast in their society. He ate dinner with tax collectors, which was like the worst sinner you could possibly be at that time. And he let, he was radical in a lot of ways. I would say he was radical in the way he loved people. He did criticize. He did have some issues with people, but it was the religious leaders of the time who were very legalistic and were doing things and making rules to hurt people that they couldn't even follow. And he called them whitewashed tombs, which is probably didn't help his defense
Or his popularity.
his popularity in their circles. Yes. But I think that's one of the things, realizing, first of all, that being a Christ follower is really more about living a life that he didn't just die so that and come back for a life again. He didn't just die Jesus didn't just die and was raised again so that we could go and live the life that we wanted to all the time and just eventually get to heaven. He died and broke in his dying and surviving death or coming back from death, he basically broke the bonds of evil that holds us in a kind of a prison of our own.
Yeah, I have a mentor, Jesse Furrick, who would describe sin in that sort of way, where it's like a prison and we were chained, but now that chain is broken, and most people still are stuck in the prison when the door is wide open.
Right.
Not recognizing that there is power and life in the spirit of Jesus, and that he does give that so you can break the chains of your sin. And not only just that, but like walk out of that prison. And I think one of the things that is a misunderstanding, and I don't know what I believe about like different denominations. That's a huge thing in my family right now that we're diving a lot into. But I think that regardless of that, there's almost like there seems to be like a lack of like belief in like the power of like Jesus and like breaking chains and like breaking sin away. And we get so stuck in like the technicalities of like, we just have to do this or believe we just have to do this or check this box off. And then we continue to live in like the mundane of life. Like being a Christ follower isn't just about getting your get out of hell free card, but it's about like going beyond that and building a relationship with Jesus. And like for everyone, that's going to look different because every relationship looks different. But I think in our conversation, one of the things that we're going to end up highlighting is that there's a lot more to Christianity than what meets the eye. And what I've seen a lot, because I actually almost left the church for this, and that's a part of like my testimony, is I was planning on leaving Christianity and not being a Christian because I had seen hypocrisy in the church. I was like, this is so dumb. Like I would go to church every week and then I would go like live a life that I was like not saying that I was living at church. And I just had noticed other people were doing that too. And I'm like, this is BS to me. Like this is weird. It's like a clown show. And so the day I decided that I was not going to be a Christian anymore, I had gone into church and I decided that was going to be like my last day going. And I had decided if I was never going to be there emotionally again. Because I had understood I probably would have ended up being there physically because my family's Christian. And so I was going to emotionally like break away from it. And I had a guy literally walk up to me, never met him before. I've never seen him again. Like I don't know who he was, but he walked up to me and he was like, I can feel your soul. You need to go talk to someone. So I talked to my youth leader, Ellery, and I was just telling her all my thoughts because I just never shared them with anyone. And I told her, I was like, everyone is just like a hypocrite here. And we were talking a bit more about that. And she had told me that people don't come to church because they're healthy. They come to church because they need healing. And like one thing that I've noticed after talking to a bunch of like atheists and agnostics, who are like dear friends, is that they'll bring up the word like hypocrisy. And I think what people don't realize is that most Christians you talk to, I'm not saying this from like a perspective, like I have everything all right and that my worldview is completely biblical because I'm still going through a sanctification period. But most people that you're going to meet who say they're Christian they don't believe basic tenets of the Bible. And so that puts us in like a dangerous place of we are putting on a face that we don't believe, and that does not look good for God, like at all. And so, and it makes sense from like a standpoint of like what the enemy would do. It's like make Christians out to be something that he'll make God out to be something that he's really not. Um, and so I think it's a calling for people to really dive deep into like what do you actually believe? And if you don't believe, then why don't you just say that? Because you might live a better life for it, like a life of honesty. Um, and also in like including all of this, one of the things that we really talk about at Journey, and honestly, it just like our basic mission is going out and discipling, which is what we call coaching. And the reason why we call it coaching is because a lot of people outside of the church don't understand the word discipleship, and even a lot of people inside the church. And so when we're talking to people outside the church, we'll say like the word coaching, just because it's something that they understand a bit better. It's not like paid or someone's an expert, but we're trying to point people back to Jesus. But we really do need to be discipling people, and we really do need to be discipled. And that's something I know I'm working on for myself because like of the importance of it. When I got saved, that was something that Jesus put on my heart was I needed to be discipled. And so I went out and sought like mentors, gals like Jessie Furrick, and I've never experienced so much fruit in my life. And my worldview has become more and more biblical. And don't just be refined by like literally one person with one type of like denomination or the way or perspective, the way they see things. Like I've been discipled by people who are charismatic, people who are like Calvinist, like just like the whole thing, because there's so much out there to learn, and it's so important to be connected. And you don't have to agree with everyone, but I think it's important to keep an open perspective.
I agree. And I think one of the key things that we're trying to get people to see is there's a lot of confusion about a lot of different things regarding our faith, and there's the word sin, and what does that mean, and there's just so many different aspects of it. And if you ask different people, you're going to get a different response. When somebody says, well, what is sin? I don't like sin. Sin is bad, right? Okay. But what is sin? So sin is anything that goes against God's will or his plan for us. And how are you going to know what that is unless you're actually reading the Bible, which is his word that tells us what those are? It means basically, and when I say anything that goes against, it's not just picking at different things like, oh, well, it's a sin to gossip, or it's a sin to, there's all these different sins that everybody talks about, but that's not the point. It's look, you got to look more into your heart and say, okay, even when I do something, if I'm trying really hard not to gossip, and I'm at work and somebody else is gossiping, and I tell them, well, you shouldn't gossip, that's a sin. Well, maybe I'm actually sinning by being judgmental against that person. Maybe I'm looking down my nose at them because I'm doing something that, they're doing something that I've decided I'm not going to do.
Or there's the sin of like pride.
Yeah. And that's kind of where I was going is are we sinning because we're prideful? I think when we get into a lot of legalism and stuff, it's like, well, you shouldn't do this, you shouldn't do that, you shouldn't do this. Are we doing that because that's where our heart is and we really want them to grow? Or are we doing that because we really want to show deep down inside, it's examining your heart. Am I just pointing those things out because I'm feeling better than them?
Once you dive so deep into it, you just realize there's so many parts of you that you didn't even notice. And I love that I've heard someone describe the Bible as the book that will read you. Mm-hmm. Because we can think that we're doing something right and then just like psych. Yeah.
Well, I think of the Bible as a owner's manual. You know, we've been in the car business forever, and every car comes with an owner's manual, or it's supposed to. I know now a lot of them are online, but that's irrelevant. But there's a owner's manual. The manufacturer, Toyota or Ford or whoever makes the car that you're driving, if you look in your glove box, you should probably find, especially if it's been older than the last couple of years, you should probably find an owner's manual, and in it lists all the things that the owner is suggesting. I've made this car in this way so that it would work better if you do these things. Mm-hmm. And if you can't figure out why it's not working, then you go to the owner's manual to find out where is that switch, or where is that button that we're supposed to push, or what do I need to turn this in? How often should I change the oil? The Bible is kind of like our owner's manual. He created us. Who else? Who better to know how we can have the best life? You know, it's not just to keep us under his thumb. He's written this. He's had this written so that we can have the best life and know what things to avoid.
Yeah. Yeah, that's amazing. And I like that. And so for the people watching, what's one thing that they could take away from this?
I like your question because I think it's important. And we started this one talking to people who are mentors or coaches. And so I think the one thing to take away from this is to really shore up yourself and understand, why are you a Christian? Why, and what does that mean to you? And where do you still grow? Because we grow until the day that we die. We're not done growing. And so you can't just say, well, I know everything, because none of us does. And so when I would just make sure you shore up yourself as far as, am I living the life that God has designed for me? Before you start trying to lead somebody else. There's a Bible verse about take the log out of your own eye before you try to help the other person. I think everybody should do coaching and discipleship, but make sure that you're keeping yourself in a healthy place that way.
Absolutely. I think that goes back to like the thing that I've heard from like mentors is like, you need to be discipled and discipling. Mm-hmm. Always making sure that you're getting poured into and continuing a spiritual walk and spiritual disciplines, because without that you're not going to be able to thrive, and you're not going to be able to help other people.
Well, and the disciple Paul, who wrote so much of our New Testament, the apostle Paul, who wrote so much of our New Testament, set that as an example. He had two people around him, one that fed into him and one that he fed into. So Paul had Barnabas, who was his discipler, and then he discipled Timothy. I was going to say, sorry, I lost his name. And then he discipled Timothy. Mm-hmm. And I think that's an example for all of us, even if we are disciplers, and even if we are mature in our faith, it helps to always have somebody with us to kind of, it helps ground us a little bit more.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with that. Well, thank you guys so much for watching. We hope you enjoyed this episode, and leave your thoughts down below in the comments. We want to hear from you. We'll see you gals soon.